Hello, everyone. A good afternoon, a good morning, or maybe a good evening, depending on where you are in the world. But in any case, a very warm welcome on our nexxworks webinar series about the future of health and well-being at work. This series is moderated by Christophe Jauquet, who has 3 conversations in total with our speakers that you can see on the screen. Last week, Christophe had a very interesting conversation with Bill Dwayne from Google. And today we have the wonderful Dr. Lavinia Ionita with us, who will be introduced in a minute by Christophe. But before we start, I would like to quickly introduce myself, of course, and I will give you a short introduction on who nexxworks is. So my name is France. I'm living in Belgium despite my name, and I'm since a bit more than 2 years, I'm innovation manager, program manager at nexxworks. This means that I'm constantly doing research to wonderful companies and startups and all over the world experts. So what is nexxworks doing on a daily basis? Bear with me if you already know us, but we are doing mainly 2 things. So we are inspiring companies, startups, people in general, about innovation and technology. So we are flying all over the world for this, and we're also really connecting these experts and these companies with each other, because we would like that companies are more collaborating with each other. So in normal times, so non-COVID times, I can say, we're going all over the world for this. So we are traveling to Shenzhen, New York, San Francisco, Berlin, Tel Aviv, you name it. It's depending on where the innovation brings us or where the customer brings us, of course. In these COVID times, we're also doing a lot of digital programs. So this wonderful nexxworks webinar series is a small example of what we could offer for you. But if you have any other question about nexxworks, just shout out to me in the chat. Or you can always send an email to hello@nexxworks.com. Before we start with the good stuff, I will quickly go through some practicals. This webinar is taking 1 hour, and you are automatically muted and your camera is turned off, but this doesn't mean that you should act muted. So definitely use the Q&A function below and the chat function that you can see next to it on your screen. So all the questions that you have for Lavinia or for Christophe, really use that Q&A button for that. If you have any links or articles that you would like to share with us or with your peers, definitely use that chat button for this as well. At the end, I will launch some polls just to ask your feedback, and then you will see a pop-up showing up where you can reply and give us some scores. And then last but not least, I would like to mention that, of course, we are using Zoom, we are using the internet, which can mean that there are some glitches, but please bear with us if that happens, and just a little bit of patience will work for that. Good to know is that the recording and some summary slides will be sent afterwards via email. If you didn't receive any recording from the last session, or you didn't receive it next week by Tuesday, you should definitely check your spam folder, because it could be in there. So we are ready to start. We have Lavinia Ionita with us. So I would love to say hi to Lavinia. She's somewhere here with us. So
hi. Hi.
Hi, Lavinia.
Hi, from Berlin.
Hi, Lavinia. So you are in Berlin now. It's good that you mentioned, because we had a few calls and you were always somewhere else. So you were in London, you were in Paris, you were in Berlin, always working. So it's good to know that you're in Berlin right now. It's a wonderful city.
Yeah, thank you. Sending you a lot of sunshine from Berlin.
Yeah, you're already shining. I will already introduce Christophe, who will have an interesting conversation with you. Christophe is a Healthusiasm author, so he wrote the book Healthusiasm, which is about how people are more and more occupied about their health and how companies should act on that. So he's a health marketing expert and is guiding a lot of startups and international companies to make sure that they have a real health strategy also towards their customers. So if you have any question about that, Christophe will be happy to help you. So Christophe, you will have an interesting conversation with Lavinia. I will give the floor to you both and enjoy it. I will come back in at the end when time's almost up. So see you in a minute, or no, in 1 hour actually. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, France, and welcome everybody. Welcome, Dr. Lavinia. Welcome to yet another interesting session on the future of health and well-being at work. Health and well-being at work, indeed, because we talk about this topic here because at nexxworks, we really want to kickstart innovation. If you want to kickstart innovation at your company, you need to have your employees at the top of their game. And that's why we're having these conversations. Last week, we talked to Bill Duane, who was a well-being expert at Google for about, I guess, 15 years, if I recollect well. And during that call, we talked a lot about how Google, during their immense growth that they've gone through, how they started focusing on the well-being of their customers. And during that conversation, stress came up quite a lot as well. And so this week, we will continue on that road. We will talk about stress, and we will do this with Dr. Lavinia Ionita. So welcome also from my side, Dr. Lavinia. May I call you Dr. Lavinia?
As you want.
Okay, wonderful. So if I understood correctly, you are a general practitioner who mostly live in London, or at least you practice in London, and you focus a lot on stress, but both as a practitioner, but also as a founder of a startup. Is that somewhat correct?
It is. So hello again, everyone. Yes, I'm a general practitioner, although I'm practicing mostly functional medicine. So I'm very interested in preventative area since very early in my career when I discovered this field. And I became also interested in stress, in mental health, because I've worked a lot in addictions field. So stress is so much related also with addictive behavior. And of course, stress became not only now with COVID, but even before became the norm of our society. So it's a huge problem. And in parallel, well, traditional medicine doesn't really tackle stress in, it's underlook at stress, even it is taken into consideration, but still it's a very oldish way to take care of people who are living with stress. And well, not lastly, unfortunately, I have also a sad personal experience in my family with stress. I lost my father several years ago from a fatal heart attack, although he haven't a cardiovascular known problem at least, and I believe that stress was for a lot in this. So all in all, I decided to not only to tackle stress in my practice as a doctor, but also to scale this and hopefully helping millions of people.
Okay, and that's a very noble ambition. I'm also sorry to hear about your loss. But I hear what you're saying, and I've worked a lot with medical practitioners, and I'm still working a lot in the health sphere. And it's true that stress typically is a bit undervalued within the traditional medicine. But perhaps it might be good if we talk about stress, it might be good just to define what stress really is, so that everybody on the line here is on the same level of knowledge, that we all could agree upon what stress is, what it does to people, and why it is so important to actually be dealing with it, both from a medical point of view, but also from a corporate point of view.
Yeah,
Could you explain a little bit more about stress?
Yeah, first of all, everyone's stress is different. So everybody knows kind of what stress it is, but everybody's stress is different, although the stress mechanism, it's the same. So we all have this defense mechanism, because the stress, it is a defense mechanism. And actually, I will share my screen. Give me 1 second. So maybe you have heard, a lot of you have heard about fight or flight or freeze reaction to stressor. So this inbuilt mechanism, actually, it is meant to save our lives when we are encountering a life-threatening situation. Okay, if there is a bear that want to eat you, or you think that he might want to do that, so you have three options: to fight the danger, to flight faster than ever, or to freeze. So this is an important thing to acknowledge, that in itself, stress, it's not bad, it's a good thing. And what is happening? Well, I will develop later, but just in very few words. So in order to do that, to fight or flight, so imagine we need a high amount of energy very quickly, within milliseconds. So at the moment when we perceived this potential threat, what's happening in our body, so we have a range of molecules that will act in a manner that we will have this energy to run for our life or to fight this danger. And so the main stress, one of the main stress hormones, or the main molecules, is cortisol, that maybe you have heard of that. Yes. And few other molecules, adrenaline. And what's happening with the body? So we, thanks to these molecules, so we will have more power in our muscles to run faster than ever, and it will come with the expense of shutting down other organs and systems that they are not useful in this moment. So this is why we can, with stress, we can have high blood pressure, high heart rate, our digestion can be impaired, our libido, and so on. So I will not enter into more details. But what is important to keep in mind is that there is not all stress is bad. So like I said, stress, until some point, it's a good thing to have. Imagine that you are on the street and there is a bus that, it almost crashed you. So it's good to have the reflex to save your life, to avoid this danger. So we have this healthy tension that will allow us to achieve this peak performance. But then when the stressor is there for too long, or it's too intense, then slowly we are going little by little into imbalance, and then breakdown, and then ultimately to burnout with a state that we really want to avoid, all of us.
Yeah.
So I will stop sharing, I think.
Okay, I think that's pretty clear, and I'm pretty sure that looking at the attendees that we have, I'm pretty sure that many of us online, we're pretty much aware of what you said. But I can imagine that very often the patients don't even know that, and even if they would know, perhaps like we do, we're not always aware of it happening, right?
Exactly.
So when you have that patient in your practice who might be stressed out, who might be going into that bad stress period, how do you approach that kind of person from a doctor point of view? How you act as a doctor when you have a stressed out person in front of you?
Yeah, before that, so I just want to come back to what you just said, that it's difficult to acknowledge the stress. And this is really an important point, because like I said, everyone's stress is different, and stress has a variety of manifestations. Of course, has psychological manifestations that we all know, anxiety, irritability, nervosity, feeling unwell psychologically, or feeling down, or unfocused, or you name it. Sleep problems. But also stress can manifest in a physical way, of course, being exhausted or tired, having some pains, or skin problems, or libido problems. So it's really difficult for many to say, okay, I have this because I am stressed. Okay. And oftentimes it's not necessarily a causality, sometimes it is, but it's just a relationship. So coming back to your question, still, and another point actually, another aspect is that we get used to stress. Mm-hmm. So even if some of those symptoms can be can bother us since a while, we say, okay, it's okay. I can live with that. It's not so bad. Or even if we feel that we are kind of stressed, we can say, okay, other people are stressed too. It's we are comforted by this. Okay, I'm not worse than anybody else that I know, which is a trap, and we will talk later. So when people come to a doctor for stress, oftentimes they don't necessarily come, and I would say maybe the majority of time, they wouldn't come saying, I'm coming here because I'm stressed. They would come because one of the main symptoms, the most common symptoms will be, I'm tired. Despite I'm sleeping well, I'm still tired. Despite my holiday, I'm still not, I feel like my energy is still low. Or of course they can have sleep problems, or they don't feel, on top of their form. Their mood is not what it used to be. Or they have, it's something, for example, I am seeing quite often lately, libido problem at young people. So not only, not necessarily related to the declines of sex hormones. And when people come to that, we always, of course, every doctor, so we try to do our best to listen and to understand these symptoms, and of course to understand the context. Mm-hmm. It's also another classical, for example, for executives or startuppers or very busy people saying, well, I'm coming, I'm not stressed, I don't have any problem, I'm quite healthy, but I'm just curious about my health. I heard about you, well, I know that you are doing something about stress, but it's not that. I just want to be more performant. Which is okay. I mean, it's perfectly fine. And I would be happy if many people will come only with this mindset. But then little by little, when I like always to hear the life story, of course, the medical story, but I like to hear their life story. And when they are telling me, well, I'm traveling every other day, I have 100 employees, or I'm raising money in this moment, it's just not possible. And they are doing that not only since 3 months, it's lasting for, 2 years. So we are not machines. So at some point, no matter how strong we are, it's not sustainable.
No.
And so I acknowledge, then we try to understand also the biology, and then we try the biology within this life context, and of course having this a plan. What can we do about that?
Yeah, so I do understand, and I think it's very important. It's very difficult as well, the way that you describe it. There's so many symptoms, of course, but if you have some assumption that it might be related to stress, what I've written down is that you need to be listening to your patient and try to understand their context, and certainly acknowledge the potential situation they might be in. Now, we are here because we want to kickstart innovation, and we want to have our employees at the top of our game. And of course, when you have a lot of stress, and you mentioned all the consequences of stress, which might be like being tired, you having a bad mood, you have less energy, perhaps you're sleeping not as well. So that has an impact on employees, and it has an impact on the way that people perform at work. So if a physician has to listen and understand to a patient, which actually is coming to him with some complaints, how does a company leader, or a company in general, what does he need to do? What can he learn from a physician experience when he has to deal with his own employees? How do you look at this?
Well, this is very challenging, I might say, because if we look at the burnout definition, which we have a new definition given that was given recently. This is an occupational phenomenon which has three main axes: well, exhaustion or extreme fatigue, negativity or cynicism, and loss of performance.
Okay.
People are less efficient. So if we look only at those three aspects for a manager, especially one who hasn't a training in mental health and mental well-being, it's not easy to identify those enough in advance, because it's what we want is to prevent that. So recognizing the performance, declining performance, it's not so hard, but the two others, it's really hard to recognize it in time.
Yeah, and probably if they recognize it, they will add some more pressure to it because he's underperforming.
Exactly. So another aspect that, well, people need to understand, and not only leaders and employees, but in general, the notion of stress. So I have shown very quickly earlier the biology and several organs and systems that are affected. In many people's mind, stress, it's quite a vague notion, although those hormones, they have really biological effects on our body and mind. So too much stress, so chronic stress, this harmful stress, why should be important for a company to be taking care of? It really affects our prefrontal cortex and other areas in our brain. So if we are a company that is striving for innovation and creativity, they just cannot do that if their team or the majority of their team, they have this harmful stress. So this is a very important aspect that maybe, we can understand very easily that cholesterol can do some blockages in our arteries, but it's harder to imagine that stress, something quite vague, can really do something on our brain, and study shows that even can modify the structure of our brain. Well, luckily for us, it's reversible, but it really affects our brain. So leaders should be aware of that, and investing in their team, and being caring regarding stress and mental well-being. It's one of the best things that they can do for the team.
And so basically, I can imagine that a leader should be then also try to listen
exactly
to the actual situation of
similarly as the doctor, it's really caring and try to listen and understand a patient's symptoms. In the same manner, of course, with some limitations, the leader has to listen and understand what's happening within her team.
Yeah. And maybe also their life, or how do you go about this? Because I can imagine, I'm pretty sure, stress is not only related to what you have at work. Stress has to do with your entire life and how it impacts, how things, the context of your life actually impact
exactly
your physical ability, your mental ability. So how does a leader need to go about this? How far does he need to go when you're talking about listening and building trust and acknowledging and understanding context?
Yeah, and leaders shouldn't, their main goal regarding mental well-being is to really build this workspace which is free of harmful stress. And of course, being aware that people can be stressed at work, or during their work hours, but being stressed for something else. So leaders shouldn't either stressed about that, saying, okay, my people are stressed, or this employee is stressed because I'm still not doing enough. So it's really important to understand what's happening, of course, with delicatesse, don't, of course, respecting the boundaries, and just pass this message that I got you. We have your back. So if you have a personal problem, if you want to talk about, we are here. If you don't want to talk about, there are several tools that you can use, and having this mutual trust and respect, which is necessary in this time. The other day, for example, well, and I know that maybe we are already late with our time, I was talking with a very young employee of a startup, and he was telling me, well, his first real job. He's very happy about the company, that he has this chance to have this job. Before, he had only some internships jobs. And he started to say, okay, I cannot focus. I'm really, I'm trying to do my best. Sometimes I'm doing good, others, well. He was, initially I saw that it was mainly the pressure of his very first job, which was, well, my assumption, well, from what he was telling me, it was mostly that. And when I go deeper and I said, what's happening else in your life? And he started to say, well, actually, one of my best friends has cancer, and the doctor, well, so very young, also friends from school, and the doctor just told him that they cannot do much about them, so very bad news. And he was like, okay, I'm very stressed at work about that.
Okay.
It may be some part of very first job, but and I asked him, did you talk to someone at work? Maybe not about that, but saying that you may have you have a personal problem, and I don't know, trying to talk about that, and saying, oh no way. It was something very intimidating to even mention without details, because anyway, it was.
We talked about that as well last week with Bill, when he said that psychological safety is basically one of the most important things for employees to actually feel good at work. But I just like to go back to stress and how managers can actually manage that stress or actually alleviate it. Like 15, 20 years ago, I think it was perhaps first mentioned, at least in my career. And back then it was like, with time management training and inbox management training. I think today we are already seeing some yoga training, etc., and perhaps some are going into breathing exercises and meditation. But I believe that you right now with your startup, you have another solution. You want to more go into a data-driven approach to actually manage or know about stress. Could you like elaborate a little bit on that as well?
Yeah, sure. So given the difficulty to acknowledge stress and also to evaluate it, so given that stress can manifest in so many different ways, having also a more objective things to evaluate the stress, it's really helpful. And this is what I want this data-driven approach that I was already using in my practice, but I wanted to do more about that. So actually measuring several of these hormones, and I will share again my screen very quickly. Yeah, so the idea is how you can how we can measure these stress hormones.
Okay.
How we can objectify the stress. So we can measure a bunch of those molecules, of course, together with some assessments and online questionnaires. also looking at heart rate variability and having a more integrative idea, 360-degree image of your stress. So like I said, we are looking at cortisol rip, so through several data points during the day, measuring several neurotransmitters, and then based on that, and also of course the lifestyle and other informations, people have a personalized health plan and the follow-up. Yeah, so
interesting. This is your startup, right?
Yeah, this is my startup.
And people buy this themselves, or is it like corporate well-being companies can buy this, or?
So people can buy it individually, directly themselves, but also corporates can buy a program. And what I like to do with corporates is to compose their own solutions. Some corporates would like to have only workshops and one-to-one sessions. Other companies would like to have I don't know, yeah, stress tests and webinars and so on. So the idea is to really have this personalization of the offer and helping company to understand what are their needs, what are their the needs of their teams, and how they can enrich their culture with more mental well-being at work.
Okay. And so it's a data-driven approach. You follow a couple of vital signs that you mentioned on the screen. And there was one question from the audience, from Vincenzo Sacco. And his question was more like, do you do it one time or do you do it multiple times? And how do you go about this? I mean, you just mentioned that every company is different, but what would be, according to you, like one of the good ways to move forward if you really want to manage stress ideally in your ideal world? What would you recommend to companies then?
Well, ideally it will be to have in place systems and have those systems running all the time. Maybe not fully, but at least have checking on your employees all the time without being intrusive, of course. So finding this fine line between gathering information but not being intrusive in order to give them the best tools and the best solutions. And ideally another way of doing it is also giving employees the freedom, and this again, so speaking of trust, so having this mutual trust and respect, saying this is those are the tools that you can use. You can use one-to-one sessions, you can use an app, you can use a group webinar. You choose what you want. So for some companies, I'm doing this risk stratification, and some companies choose to take care or in priority of their people who are not at risk. So they say, okay, we want only, the most things we want to invest in those people at risk. But I think ideally, if we create a space where people feel comfortable to choose what they want when they want, for me, it will be, I think, one ideal solution. And of course, managers, very, very important is to also have a training about that. Like I said before, it's really challenging for manager to dealing with that if they don't have a training. And even if they are very good at, it's always helpful to have a third person or company or whoever it is. So it's it's kind of a buffer between employee and employers.
Yeah.
People feel more comfortable when
and I think
they have additional help.
And I think you touched upon a very important point, actually, because Rich Davino mentioned it as well. I mean, stress is very sensitive. I mean, if you would mention to your boss that you have stress, you might come across as, perceived as weak. And many cultures, many internal cultures in a company do not really allow for that. So people might be afraid to lose their job, or maybe just don't want to admit that they are weak, or maybe just they are just not aware. And you also mentioned, in fact, that it might come across as intrusive if a company just suddenly just pops out this test where they ask the employees to do this kind of measuring of the vital signs and the biomarkers, etc. And if the culture is not there, it's pretty difficult. What I see when I work with on corporate well-being with startups as well is that very often many companies, certainly in Europe, they are more focused on facilitating a good working environment, like, make sure that there is no stress, but they aren't too ready yet to actually, help their employees in becoming healthy or avoiding that they might become ill. I think we're still at the balancing shift there, that we are more looking into the context and not really looking to the person yet. Do you feel that as well, that many cultures within companies are more focused on this facilitating part and perhaps a little less yet on, making sure that their employees are healthy and remain healthy?
Yeah, sure. Well, we are, it's a beginning, and we are at the beginning of this shift from maybe focusing on, speaking of workspace, helping people to be fit, or helping them with meditation apps, or yoga at work, and giving them healthy food, which is very good, towards, okay, maybe we can also help them to be fit for the brain fitness and for the mental well-being. And it's a delicate topic, of course, and we all also have this still mindset of, preventative health. It's still difficult for many of us. We are so used to ask for help for our health when we have a problem, and not in a preventative way. That kind of also it is translated in the workspace. Not to mention that at work people may be also maybe too careful not to touch at health from the legal point of view, or I don't know, they may be scared of crossing the line, which is legitimate, or they shouldn't. In the same time, a good leader, of course, we talked earlier about trust, so they should lead by example. And you mentioned people, maybe employees may be uncomfortable to say, I am tired, or I am not feeling well. But if the leader also show this vulnerability and talk to people in a show empathy, then this will also encourage people to say, okay, I can say I'm not feeling well because I have a familial problem, or I am whatever, or I have a problem with my manager, or I'm I'm dealing with a problem that I don't know how to solve it. So
it ties back again, I guess, to what Bill Duane last week said, is that you need to have this psychological safety.
Yes.
And this is part of the culture, actually, that you are raising, that you are putting out as a company leader. But there needs to be this psychological safety to be able to do this, right?
Exactly, because you can have all the programs in the world. You can take every possible, I don't know, the best thing that you can imagine you can do for your employees individually or as a team. But if you're not leading by example, if your culture doesn't allow this psychological safety, this real mutual trust and respect, then well, they will feel a little bit better, but we are far for solving the problem. So it's like the fire is still going on.
And I think it's very visible, if you ask me, in the way that companies decide upon what to do with their employees or what to do around corporate well-being. And I'll explain myself. Very often what you see is that there needs to be like this return on investment when they invest in one or the other support. So what they do is they calculate that, at least, for example, if you have a company of 1,000 people, that maybe at least 400 or 500 people needs to be participating, so that the return on investment is high enough for them and that they can actually move forward for it. So when they actually launch that program, then that corporate well-being program, well, they will push it that hard that even employees will feel, well, whoa, but this is not for me. This is because the company actually wants it. And so what I always try to say when I'm working around corporate well-being as well is that, I mean, if you want to put out this program, whether it is stress related or mental health or even movement, exercise and whatsoever, if you want to put this corporate well-being program out, the important thing is that it comes across as being something for them, and not being something that is made or decided by you that needs to have this or that actual return. I'm not saying that return on investment is not important, but it's more about what is the value that you can get in return, right? The value could be like that people are more innovative, that they are more performant, that they appreciate what you are putting forward. And that is something that I really quite a lot see happening, is that companies still want to have at least X amount of people into that program. Otherwise, it's a failure. But just by doing it, it will become a failure.
Yeah, exactly. And well, actually, that there is a human cost with coming with too much stress and burnout, but also it's an economical cost. So there is definitely a good investment for them, but how do you measure the value if you lose your best employees? It's really, the value, it's the loss, it's immense, and you cannot really quantify this. And if you pass this message, okay, we are doing for you, and it's up to you if you want to take it. And also, maybe I didn't mention before, but it goes, it's logical. Companies, they never have access to individual data, of course, and they can have access to aggregated report only if the group is big enough.
Yeah.
So it's a completely,
makes sense.
Yeah.
But it depends again, and I'm coming back to my point. I mean, if the company does not come across as just trying to help their employees, not for their own sake, but for others, and actually their employees themselves, then you won't need to explain it too much.
Exactly. They really need to truly care about their team. It's not about, we are hearing a lot, okay, we are innovative, we are building trust, we are empathic, but like in love, it's not enough saying I love you. I need to see what you're doing about that.
It's being caring. And I think certainly right now, we are in a period which comes with a lot of stress. I mean, you see it in the newspaper every day, the mental health thing. I mean, we're all living at home. We have 2 kids on our laps who wants to play, who needs to do their homework. And what I've recently read is that instead of working 9 to 10 hours, many people now work 12 hours just because they're distracted that much. So there's a lot more stress going on, certainly also with the uncertainties that are present in our life and our world today. So I think even this is the right time to actually focus on stress and see how you can actually alleviate that stress, or even measure for a starter. So how do you look at that? When we're thinking about the pandemic and everything that's going on, how do you look at what the role would be of a company leader related to stress then?
I think if before COVID, companies were starting to be involved in this, starting to be aware about the utility of mental well-being at work, at work now, it's not anymore a luxury, it's become a necessity, and it's obvious for everyone. And I think companies should really think how they want to be helped about that. Even like I said before, they can be trained, there are several ways to doing it, but just ignore it will be it will not be the best approach. This biggest uncertainty of our lifetime, of course, bring a lot of challenges and opportunities for innovation. And if you have the right tools for that, you can do this way better than if you were doing without taking care of the mental health and mental well-being at work.
Yeah, true. And
yeah,
I think, sorry,
there is a lot of also, there is a big need of flexibility here. And well, we all learn that we need to adapt now constantly and deal with this uncertainty. We need to build this together as a team, as a society, humanity. We don't really know what's next, but as long as we stick together and we are embracing this and we are willing to help each other, I think, we will go through this in the best way, and we will be able to build a better world, because it's what we want all.
Yeah, and I think, I've been hearing it way too much. Don't waste a good crisis, and I'm kind of sick of it, of this line. But there's a lot of truth in it, of course, and I think also for this thing, like employees or employers, they actually have lost like physical contact and maybe even frequent contact with their employees. They're sitting at home, they're working remotely, so it's also a lot more difficult to actually know what is going on with your employees. So in the beginning of the session, you were talking about listening and understanding their context, and I think this is one of the moments where company leaders or team leaders actually really should listen to their employees to better understand what their actual context is. And perhaps this is the beginning then of a radical shift in company culture that maybe might open up things and make sure that new forms and new ways of managing, for example, stress is more accepted as well by employees. So I really think that because we are so distant, I think listening and trying to change that company culture right now is super important. Although we all know that it's a very difficult period for everyone, for every type of business. So we are working a lot and there's a lot of stress. But right now, I think this is one of the most important things for a company to do. Not the least if we want to, as nexxworks always say, kickstart innovation, of course.
Yeah, no, I didn't want it to celebrate pain. It is, well, we are, it's painful for many of us, but when you go together to a hard time, it's at least you have this opportunity to build a better relationship or to restart a new relationship, and then, well, hopefully also be creative and build new things together.
Exactly. And I mentioned it during the last webinar we had as well. I call it togetherness. And I think this is one of the very important things that we have. I mean, if you're interested in that topic, there's an ebook on the nexxworks website that I wrote on specifically togetherness as well. And what it means is that we are in this together and we need to make sure that we feel it. And as a company leader, if your employees are stressed out or not, I think this is the time to make them feel part of a bigger thing and making sure that they feel that together we are going to survive this and we're going to even do better.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's try to have to use this to use this opportunity. I'm looking at the questions that we've received. Let me have a look. Is there anybody who actually has another question there? From the audience, if somebody wants to throw out a question, please do so. I see that there are some suggestions like Moonbird, which is actually a breathing device, but goes a lot further than just the breathing exercises that we have on our Apple Watches. Sorry, I was distracted by a comment that comes along. But if anybody still has a question for Dr. Lavinia, please feel free to do so. Perhaps from your side, Dr. Lavinia, if you have like perhaps one major tip for anybody online if they want to deal with stress at their work, or if they want to go to companies and advise them on stress. Anything you wanna leave the audience with, like saying this is the thing that we would love you to focus on?
The first thing when it comes to stress, the first thing to do that everybody knows about, it's breathe. So I'm talking about acute stress. So if you have a stressful moment, breathing, exercising, mindfulness technique, whatever it is, just take a few deep breaths, and it will it should feel better. On a bigger level, if you would be interested to get help with stress at work or improve your mental well-being at work, don't hesitate to talk to your manager or contact me or other companies or other specialists and say, hey, I would need help for that. And even better, if you can ask to my company if you can suggest the demo program, or if you can make them an offer. So don't be shy and speak out your mind and ask for help. This is really important. Statistics were saying that 1 in 4 employees are stressed at work, and only 1 in 3, I think, they lose their sleep at work because of stress at work, and only 1 in 2 would ask for help. So which is it's too bad to stay alone when you are unwell.
Yeah, I agree. And those are quite some numbers, 1 in 4 and 1 in 3. I think you mentioned today very well the importance of stress. I think we talked about the psychological safety that was also mentioned about Bill last week. And you also mentioned that there needs to be this culture of being able to talk about these kind of things. And then with that, I'd like to bridge to next week, because next week we have Dr. Martin Newman in the webinar, and he's a wonderful guy. I really invite you to come and listen. He's actually an expert in emotional intelligence, but also in mindfulness at work. And so he can certainly help companies or company leaders into, create that culture, train themselves on how to approach and listen to your employees actually. So we will continue down that same road. How can companies make actually sure that their employees are at the top of the game so that they can kickstart innovation as much as possible? If I
can add only one quick thing, speaking of companies, what the companies that tackle mental stress at work already, you've heard probably about Headspace, which is a guided meditation app. And one of the things they have implemented for their employees is to have Mondays. So every other Friday, it's off for their employees. So to encourage them to take care of themselves. And the other Fridays, they don't have meetings. So it's very cool. And also twice a day, they have 30-minute slots, 2 slots of 30 minutes dedicated to mindfulness. And employees, they can do whatever they want, or they can, it's just a quick example. And
wonderful.
I think I let
No, thank you. And there's so many. I mean, there's Calm, which is similar as Headspace. There's also the trend of wellness sabbaticals, where companies actually motivate people to go abroad and actually, work from the side of the ocean or close to the pool whatsoever. I mean, there are things happening, and we're very happy for that. We're also very happy that you were here, Dr. Lavinia.
Thank you.
And with this closing, I'd like to give the word back to Frans, who will close the session and quickly ask to the audience what they've found about this session. Frans?
Mm-hmm. Indeed, Christophe, thank you. Thank you, Christophe, for moderating this session. Thank you, Lavinia, for sharing so many interesting insights. I would like to ask to the participants to answer our poll that I just launched. It's about feedback because we're really learning a lot about these webinars and from these webinars. So please give us some feedback. And next to this, I would like to ask you, if you enjoyed this webinar, please try to bring someone next week, because we believe that the network always wins. So that would be wonderful, of course. I'm really looking forward to the session next week as well. And in the meantime, we will be there with our blog, with our podcasts, to give you some more inspiration. So I hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.